do a deeper dive from Sacramento down to Modesto and back up to Stockton. High-profile crimes have rocked our area for decades. Over the last 70 years here at KOVR, since our beginning, we have been there on days that prove sometimes real life is darker than fiction.
That's exactly right. Here's your reporter, Madison Keevy.
She's a very evil woman.
I had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance.
These are the crimes that rocked our communities and captivated the country.
The last time the East Area rapist struck in this area was April of 1978. And the question that everyone hopes isn't answered is, when will he strike again?
Known by a whisper and a few composite sketches, the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist.
The masked assailant, who has wielded a knife and gun, raped 30 women in the Sacramento area.
Decades later, in 2020, answers inside a Citrus Heights home. DNA evidence and a genealogy site ID'd the man who now only needed one name, the Golden State Killer.
Joseph D'Angelo appeared emotionless here in court.
Sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, confessing to 13 murders and dozens of rapes.
I've listened to all your statements, and I'm truly sorry.
Vampire killer Richard Trenton Chase terrorizes neighborhoods.
More Sacramento terror. This time, the killer convicted of 6 violent murders in the span of a month.
When she realized she was being followed by a former fellow student at Miraloma High School.
I realized I'm trying to get off parole. I'm trying to...
That's Dorothea Puente,
get my life together.
a Sacramento boarding house owner found guilty of killing at least 9 of her elderly and disabled tenants in the 1980s.
She's a very evil woman, and it comes out in everything she says and does.
Their bodies buried on her property, and she'd collect their Social Security benefits.
As the search for bodies continued today, Marshall Lozano was still having trouble believing that his good friend Dorothea was the evil woman that others described.
The Speed Freak Killers.
Lauren Herzog and Wesley Sherman.
A serial killer duo convicted in 4 murders, claiming more than 70 in and around San Joaquin County, according to letters he sent our newsroom.
He admitted, "I had an active role."
This serial killer is on the loose.
An 18-month spree and a manhunt for the Stockton serial killer. CBS 13, one of the first to speak with the only survivor.
So I prayed for him.
Only in interviews do we learn more about the suspects behind these crimes.
The Ted I knew disappeared.
Theodore Kaczynski, the so-called Unabomber, behind a series of deadly bombings that spanned 20 years. 2 in Sacramento. It was Kaczynski's brother who tipped off police before his arrest.
I was feeling something I really didn't expect to feel at all, which was a deep sense of unease, fear.
Nearly 4 months since the 11-year-old J.C. Dugard was kidnapped by a man and woman in a gray car has seemed
That was
like a
1991 in South Lake Tahoe. Photojournalist Dennis Lopez behind the camera.
One of the things that stick out was they moved up to Lake Tahoe to get away from LA and the crime.
Lopez still remembers this interview.
I jumped on a mountain bike, I started up the hill, and I realized I couldn't get to her before they took off.
I couldn't believe he was talking to us. I mean, again, that's what makes us feel special, that he allowed us to do that and tell that story.
At times, tragedy played out on KOVR Live. 4 gunmen held 50 hostages inside the Good Guys electronics store. It ended in a violent shootout after more than 12 hours. July 1976, 130 miles from the state capitol in Chowchilla. A school bus carrying 26 children and their driver hijacked.
They were herded into moving vans, then hidden in a trailer buried in a rock quarry. After 15 hours, they dug their way out.
The Cleveland Elementary School shooting, one of the deadliest in U.S. history at the time. Some crimes haven't left the headlines.
Why do court documents say she's still telling people she's been kidnapped?
Sherry Papini, who faked her own kidnapping in 2016, then admitted to the hoax, was convicted of fraud and false statements.
I had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance.
Back in the headlines and in a courtroom, Scott Peterson.
There are a lot of suspicions out there.
Convicted for killing his pregnant wife, Lacey, in 2002.
It was my opportunity to follow Scott Peterson.
Photojournalist Ralph Cervantes remembers behind the scenes.
Somewhere here.
Walking back, there was chalkboard that had Merry Christmas on it. And I knew that Lacey had wrote that.
It's pretty wearing on all of us. It's changed our lives.
Stockton teen Kristen Smart disappeared in 1996 as a freshman at Cal Poly. Her former classmate, the last person to see her alive.
Investigators have a prime suspect in the Smart case, but don't have the evidence to arrest him.
More than 2 decades later, our cameras were there as that classmate was convicted in her death.
You could both see and hear the Smart family's reaction to something that they've been waiting for 26 years.
So many stories. Wow. A couple stick out to me. J.C. Lee Dugard, when they found her after being kidnapped, and then the East Area Rapists when they said, hey, go to Citrus Heights and cover this because they found him. I said, they found him?
I was in a Ross shopping center when I found out that news in Texas and even knew the gravity of it.
So much has happened that we've covered over the years.